When life gives you lemons, fuck life. It's not a good attitude to have, but hey, it made you chuckle, didn't it? There are other mantras that I could use for right now. Staring at the blackboard, I'm pummeled with gobbledygook science shit. And I think maybe the mantra, "it's okay not to have the answer," isn't the best either. Especially when you're trying to earn a science degree. Not having the answer is the death of that little rectangle of paper that will unlock so many doors. But chemistry. You're just math in disguise. And when it comes to math, I'm not too shabby. Delta x times delta p is greater than or equal to Planck's constant divided by 4 times pi. Solve for x. Fuck you, Heisenberg, and your little equation too. I got this. Uncertainty in velocity or position. That one equation could so easily exemplify so many things in my life was amusing too. Once I know where I am, I have no idea what I'm doing. Once I know what I'm doing, I have no idea where I am. Or at least, where I came from. I mean, sometimes I'm just not there. But hey, Heisenberg was okay with uncertainty too. So I guess I take back the fuck you. So I go back and remind myself of where I'm headed. And I know that deconversion is not the end. You have to keep learning. When you're newly deconverted, you can find yourself in a place of extreme possibility. You don't so much open Pandora's box as you smash it to the ground, screaming sometimes without even knowing it.
And Pandora wasn't real either, was she? So fuck her and her stupid box too.
Only to find that the contents were there in your face the whole time. I'm already an angry person, and having to manage more on top of having to manage my obsessive triggers is way too much internalizing. But sometimes I do it without even noticing. That feeling like you've been lied to, and that the person will never say that they're sorry for wronging you because they were never there to begin with. The anger roils. It's like trying to dry a pair of shoes in a dryer that has no door lock. You don't mind the clunkety-clunk so much as having to go back and shut the goddamn door when the sound stops. Then repeat this step 10 or 11 times, and they're still not fucking dry. I don't mind being obsessed with learning, but I do mind being obsessed and angry over nothing. There's nothing wrong anymore. Yeah, without religion on my back, I have so much less to be upset about. Yeah, I left Plato's cave. But do I have to be so upset at the people who are still in there? And then I wonder, does anyone ever really leave Plato's cave? Or do we merely leave one cave for another? The uncertainty precedes itself, I think, as the professor solves an equation for energy, then subtracts that energy from the energy of the electron in the S1 orbital, then uses that number to define the wavelength and therefore the color within the visual spectrum. Maybe Plato's cave is more like the progression of TV and film. Originally, we saw everything in celluloid, and once you realize it's just the phi phenomenon, photoelectrons being sent back in black and white quanta, you move out of one cave into another, where the cathode ray tube, sometimes color, sometimes black and white, fires more electrons at you, sometimes leaving harmful radiation on the wall behind it. VHF, UHF, VHS, Betamax, the knob that makes that gug sound when looking for PBS. The plasma cave is nice with DVD at 720p, but LCD at 1080i or P with Blu-ray is much better. But with 3D, it's all coming into focus. I can see everything. But how much clearer can it get? Atticus went home from camp heartbroken. Everything was wrong, and it was his fault. Here is a dangerous thought to darken your day. Here's an obsessive tick to make it go away. He thinks, I am a mote in the eye of a god. The end and the beginning, they don't matter. He was already in hell. The thought sets him rocking on the couch. His father looks at him curiously, but doesn't ask what's wrong. Addie doesn't want him to anyway. He couldn't explain. He thinks then, if I get up and walk around, I'll feel better. There are demons in this room that will possess me, and if I don't perform certain tasks, they will. Go into each room once, then come back out, and it won't happen. I'm sure of it this time. I'm sure. His dad asks, what are you looking for? Addie's stunned by the question. He says, nothing. But his father gives him an incredulous look. Nothing. I swear, Dad. The sudden realization that others could catch on to what he's doing makes him more fearful, because talking about it will only make it worse. It has to be internalized. At home, out with friends, at church, everywhere was a potential place that someone might see what he's going through. And if they see, they'll know everything about this person is wrong. He's gay, he's a blasphemer, he's dirty and has dirty thoughts, and even God left him behind. Why should we bother with him? Nothing, Dad. Nothing. His dad no longer wanted to be a Christian, and that's how come he and Addie's mother are divorced. Their last date was a disaster, Addie had heard. At a posh dinner in some fancy restaurant, in a scene that Addie would repeat in the future with his own wife. They're trying to make amends. Bloodless marriages are bloodless and should die before anyone gets hurt. This marriage was as dead as fried chicken. She asked if Addie's dad would come back to church and be a Christian again, then asks, didn't he love God anymore? His dad replied with a curt, "Fuck God," and then left the table after throwing down his napkin on an uneaten arugula salad. He hadn't even finished the first course. No, Addie's dad was no longer a Christian, and he wouldn't understand anything. Years later, Addie would talk to his dad about everything and nothing. Same with his mom. But in hindsight, Mom was the more optimal choice if he had to talk about this. If he dared to talk about this. He stands in front of the TV blocking his dad's view and asks if he's going to Mom's that weekend. His dad shoos him away and says, "Yes, why?" No reason. And then Addie gulps in a dry throat as visions of hell float through his mind. Burning children in their mother's arms and scalding hot pools of blood bubbling and scorching every surface of a fiery inferno laid out in infinity. There is no leaving. Atticus had once burned himself by touching the coil of an old stove, thinking it wasn't hot. The coil left circles on his hands for weeks. His mother said, "That'll teach you," while rubbing neosporin on the wounds and wrapping his hand in gauze. He imagines that all over his body and marches to his room hiding under the covers. Yes, his mother could help, just as she had with his hands. This frantic little mote did not stop repeating sentences in his head, and did not sleep that night or for several nights thereafter. He could not wait for the weekend where he would dare tell someone what was going on. The day came, and sitting there in his mom's little nook, his hair disheveled, his eyes sunken in from his sockets from lack of sleep, he looked like a corpse. She was cooking him eggs and bacon, and even with those pleasant aromas in the air, he still didn't feel comfortable enough to tell her what was wrong. Chin down, staring at his Nirvana t-shirt, she says, "Well, if nothing's wrong with you, could you watch the bacon while I take a shit?" Every once in a while, she would swear, and it usually lightened his mood. He smiled and moved to the stove with the coil burners that made what little happiness his mother had brought him go away. She comes back in, asking her tall son if he could help her hang curtains today. He nods. "I know that's boring, but if we finish up fast, we'll go to a movie later and then you can go to youth group." He scarfed down the bacon and eggs while she gathered the ladder and the long blue curtains that would fit the floor-to-ceiling windows of her Victorian-style apartment. He looks somehow soggy and drooping. As he mounts the ladder with her electric drill ready to hang drapes, he thinks, this would be the most ignominious death ever, to fall off this ladder and break my neck. Yeah, he knows the word ignominious, and he's not shy to use it. Then I would know where I'm going, heaven or hell. There's a tear streaming down his chin. "What's really wrong with you?" she asks, in such a way that made him believe later in life that all mothers, or women in general, have Bene Gesserit powers of voice that could coax the answers out of any unsuspecting person. In that moment, he asks, "Ma, what's blasphemy of the Holy Spirit?" He had already heard so many interpretations, but he knew hers would be the best. She frowns, says, "That's a pretty heady subject. Why are you worried about that?" Perhaps it was the fact that she knew that he was worried without him even saying it. Perhaps it was the concern on her face. But he sobbed and stepped off the ladder, and the words fell out of his mouth. "I think I'm going to hell." And immediately, as he said it, he felt lightheaded and sat on the couch next to her. "Why would you think that? Were they talking about that at camp?" "Yes," he replied in a broken voice. "I don't know what it is, Ma, but I think I've done it." She shakes her head flatly and says, "You haven't." "I have, Mom," he cries. "No, you haven't. How do you know?" Because if you had, you wouldn't be worried about it. This shut him up. What his mother may or may not have realized in this moment in saying this, and that Atticus had subconsciously thought, was, well, so long as I'm worried about it, that means I've never done it. Best keep worrying underneath it all. He said, that sounds reasonable, but I've turned my back on God in my thoughts and my actions. You're damn right it sounds reasonable. What else did they tell you about at camp? Hell. Atticus Blake, I am not now, nor have I ever been worried about hell. We're annihilationists, hun. We don't believe in hell. Just that when the people who die without Christ die, they die forever, and that's it. If turning your back on God was the unforgivable sin, then all of us would be going into the black. She asked, have you accepted Christ as your Lord and Savior? I don't even know what that means, Ma. She told him the sinner's prayer, and they prayed it together. He accepted Jesus and felt better. A lot better. But obsessions never die so easily. She drops him off at youth group, a new Christian, but still human with the eyes and thoughts of a teenager. Sitting there amongst his youth group friends, he doesn't even realize it. But he's been staring at Mike's butt through the hole of the folding chair, wondering what all gay boys do when they let their minds wander. Being a new Christian, he fought his thoughts still and would fight them for another 17 years. Through high school, through work, through marriage and medication, births and deaths, he fought the human part of him. Leaving class, I walk across campus noting just how beautiful everyone is, and I'm happy, and the sun is shining. I'm headed to the academic commons. On the way, I get a few handshakes and fist bumps. Yeah, I'm not too old for that. Saying hello in the New World lingo, which is actually the Old World mixed in with some weird hand gestures. I reach the steps of the commons, and there's a man a little older than me standing, handing out pamphlets with a few scraggly teens standing behind him. The older man moves in front of me before I can go into the building, and before he even speaks, I know what he is and what he wants. My mother's Bene Gesserit powers have penetrated me as well. Hi, he says, and then asks if I would like to attend the nightly services they hold on campus, as well as youth group. I tell him how old I am. He looks shocked, but says anyway, that doesn't matter, church is for everyone. I'm angry. So angry. I could tell him that it's all horseshit, and then I could tell him to fuck off. I could tell him anything that would make this man go away. I could even use Peter Boghossian's handbook for creating atheists, and deconvert him right on the steps of the academic commons, lay his faith to waste. But I don't. I say, interrupting him, I was a born-again Christian for 20 years of my life, and now I'm an atheist, and I'm not interested. The scraggly teens frown in disappointment, and I think, don't worry, boys, Jesus isn't watching you masturbate. And then I walk on, leaving my anger on the steps. I am free where you are not, and everything is clear, I think.